Morning, camp. We're here down at the creek, and today I'm going to be talking about doing some creek study. So one of our activities at camp is that we get to go out and do a creek stomp, and so part of that is exploring God's creation through the water. Here at Otterbein, we have our creek coming out of our lake, and so I'm going to be walking down the trail here, and we're going to find some critters, hopefully some underneath some of these rocks in there. So I'm going to invite you guys that if you would like and talk to your parents about where's a good place, but go find a local creek around you. There's lots of metro parks or recreation areas around your houses, and so I'm sure you'll have fun adventuring in the creek. I like to bring my kids down here. They like to go splash around and create little rock shelters and things. So go explore, and let's see what we can find in the creek. All right, so we've arrived at our creek location here. As you can see, there's a nice slow trickle going here. We're gonna be looking for things called benthic macroinvertebrates. So let's break those down real quick. So benthic means things that live on the bottom, right? Macro, things that you don't need a microscope to look at, and invertebrates, things that don't have a backbone. So some examples are, we have backbones, right? We have bones on the inside of our body, where some critters have an exoskeleton, or some are just jelly, like worms. They don't have a skeleton system. So let's go down here and see what we can find. So what I'm gonna do is just turn over some rocks, and right here you can kind of see that this is sticking out of the water a bit. So on the bottom of these, you're gonna find little critters that sometimes just kind of crawl around. Right now we're in the nymph stage of a lot of our critters. Some of them have gone out to bloom. So we have things like mayflies or damselflies that, or even dragonflies that go out and fly around our lake. And so they actually lay their eggs underneath these tiny rocks, and sometimes you can see the critters crawling around on the bottom. Other things that we'll see, I don't know if you can tell, there's a little cluster of things down there. Those are actually little homes that critters like to live in. So lots of cool little things that we can find. Some bigger things that we might find are like crawdads. I don't know if you all have seen crawdads or crayfish. Some people call them crayfish in different areas. Those are basically tiny lobsters that live around our creeks. So you can pull apart those little nest-looking things, and sometimes you'll find little worms in there. And these aren't like regular earthworms. They're little larval type worms that can grow into different things that live in our creeks. So I'm gonna explore a little bit here and see what I can find, and I'll show you some cool stuff. All right, so here's one of our mayfly nymphs that it's tiny. It kind of looks like a tiny little bug, a tiny little dragon, if you will, but it's crawling around there right outside my finger on top here. And so you can see it moving around. So that's like a baby dragonfly. That's gonna grow into a dragonfly and fly around and be really colorful there up in our lake. So those are pretty cool to find. Harmless, they're not gonna hurt you. You can let them crawl over your finger. They just need to live in wet environments. So that's why they live on the bottom of rocks and can grow safely under there. So we'll put him back, or her. All right, so we got, I found our first crawdad here. It's a small one, it's about the size of my thumb. It's under this rock, so I'm gonna try and lift it slowly so that the cloud doesn't dissolve it. But you'll notice if it gets scared, it's gonna move backwards really quickly. So it can crawl forwards, but it moves, it kind of shoots backwards to get away from predators. So let's see how it does here when I remove its shelter. So just look really closely. Oh, you can see him poking out there. And if we move it really closely, there he is. So he's really slow up front. They do have pinchers, right? But if you grab him right behind the head, and oop, there he darted. So you can grab him right behind the head and pick him up. or you can just look at him from a distance if that's not your thing. Yeah, you can see how quick he moves backwards in the water, just shooting around all over the place. That's a little tiny one. Sometimes I've seen them as big as my hand, and then that guy's a little tiny one, but pretty cool. All right, so here's our first critter. To show you just how tiny some of these are, I found it on this rock here on the bottom, so I flipped it over, and it's a little red worm. So let's see if it'll focus on it here. It's so tiny, but it's kind of crawling around a little bit. So it's probably smaller than what a fingernail end would be, sticking off the end of your finger. It's just so tiny. And so some things that would feed on this would be the little critters that are trying to grow here. So talking about life stages, so we had our dragonflies that are probably all now flying around the lake, but they, as nymphs, that's their baby stage, would probably feed on these. If we get some larger critters in here, then our crawdads would be feeding on that. So you can find little crawdad homes if you ever see a hole in the ground with some mud piled up next to it. That's usually a crawdad home. So you can find that around here. It looks like we're gonna go up to our lake and see what we can find, some bigger critters to show. Some other things that you'll find on top of the water. So we're talking about benthic things which live on the bottom of the water, but there's water striders, some different kinds of pill bugs that'll crawl across the top of the water, all kinds of spiders if you're into that around, and some just different cool things that you can explore and find. Definitely frogs or minnows would be swimming around, so we can see all sorts of things like that. So let's go up to the lake and see what we can find. All right, so we're over at the lake now. We did some cool findings down in our creek, but there's also some cool things right at the water's edge of our lake. So I'm over here by our canoes. One thing I found already, this is what used to be a frog egg sac. So it's really jelly that they use to protect the eggs when they put them in the water. And so it looks like a little tiny ball when it's underwater, right? So it almost blends in. It turns into this little round ball underwater. So it just blends in down there and helps protect the frog eggs. And over here we have a mussel shell. So here in the lake we have mussels. This one's since been vacated, so there's no mussel in there. If you find them, they are closed, and so you'll find them right underneath the surface. And yeah, so if you've ever seen those, we're gonna try not to pull them apart if you do have a mussel in there, but sometimes you can let them do that. You can see the hinge all the way in the back where those two connect. So if you ever pull one apart, then it won't be able to survive afterwards. So, but you can see it almost looks like a slug coming out of the shell when there's one in there. So those are cool. A lot of fish like to eat those, and critters that live around here. So they'll go and search for them. Raccoons like to go and search for them too. So yeah, so those are some cool things that we can find at the water's edge. And if you don't know what something is, we have a cool dichotomous key. And so I'm gonna show you that. All right, so let's say you found something in your water collection, and you can take a little clear plastic tub out with you and put some things in there, what you find, and then put them back when you're done. But let's say you find something that you have no idea what it is, or you just want to know what it's called. So this is a cool dichotomous key that we'll have posted on the website as well. But what you do is start all the way at the top, and you're going to work your way down. So it's like a yes or no answer. You have one or a few options as you go. So first off, you're going to pick an object, pick a critter that you found, and you're going to say, is it a shell or does it not have a shell, right? So then you go down the line. So if it's a shell, then we're going to see what kind of shell it is. So let's pick our mussel that we found, right? So it has 2 shells, which means it's double. It closes on the side. So we go down to double shell. And then from there, does it look like a large dark colored one, or does it look small and whitish, right? So those are our options, and then it tells us what it is. So ours was dark colored, and so it's a freshwater mussel, right? There's a cool one for single shells. You can see if the pouch opens to the left, then it's a spiral one. If the pouch opens to the right, then it's a gilled one. So our pouch snails breathe with lungs, and our spiral gilled snail breathe with gills. So you can tell what environment they can live in. So after you figure out what things are, you can circle it on your sheet if you want to print it off. Here's all of our larvae and nymphs down here, so you can see how many tails. Some of those get kind of hard to decide which kind they are, but you can look at the body structure to figure it out. Some things, again, are floating on there on the water. It's like stick bugs you can find, the water striders, and then some of our beetles, so they can have wings or no wings, hardbacks. So just kind of see what you can find out there and take note of it.